Oh, it's the season.
Pete, can you hear me? Pete, can you hear me? Hey.
Sorry.
David Bennett?
Oh, what do you do? Someone took away my...
Hi there. Oh, I know who you are. Okay. Okay.
If you do unmute,
for the,
Supposed to be able to hear you.
absolutely, and for the ones that aren't here, I'll make sure to get
The
them.
ones that aren't here,
Oh, you absolutely can do that. You absolutely can.
we can do
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting. Roll call, please.
Fire. Paschal.
Here.
Rosenfitch.
Here.
Bargander.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Witzel.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Spiros. Here. Bucky.
Here.
Hendler.
All right, thank you very much. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item C, public comment. At this time, the mayor will recognize members of the public who have indicated their desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the mayor, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. Council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Anyone from the public wish to address the council? Please go to the podium and state your name and address.
Teresa Canepa, 1501 South Cherry Avenue here in Marshfield. And I have a question for you guys. You are employed by us, we the people. So you should be keeping us in mind when you spend our money. So my question is, why can't the utilities be sold to the WPS and we won't have to worry about the $17 billion?
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to address, please? Please state your name and address at the podium.
Dorothy Schnitzler, 709 South Cherry, Marshfield, and thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I'm going to read from what I have submitted to the mayor and to all the aldermen. Why is the Marshfield utility asking for approval from our elected aldermen, as they were elected by the people to run the city, for the best ability for the residents of Marshfield? As these 10 elected aldermen are to be the watchdogs to make sure that the residents of Marshfield are fairly represented. Question, please, to the Marshfield utility. Where is the electricity generated from? Is it coal or nuclear? When were the plans made for this expansion, and why and by whom? Where is the proposed location of this new facility? If approved, how will this be funded for that $17 billion? If more buildings are housed to house trucks and autos are needed, what about renting buildings for that, and also for the office space if needed? I am submitting this to Nicholas Cum, manager of the Marshfield utility, as an open records request. Respectfully submitted. And if I may, thank you. I'm going to just hand.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to address? Please go to the podium and state your name and address.
I'm Jim Hiller, 1011 East Grant Street. I've been here before, so I just have a few things. I'm going to say just a couple phrases. I'd like you all to think about what I'm saying. John Doe investigation, misconduct in public office, moral and ethical violations, open meetings violations, additional and new criminal charges filed, terminate and replace, lawsuits and huge monetary payouts, city politicians controlled by a legal firm, administration level employees failing to do their job, deception, poor decisions, lies and more lies, suppression of the truth. As I read these statements, every one of you were starting to associate names related to them. You all know what to do. Do what is right. I'm closing with 3 sets of numbers. If you don't know the significance of these numbers, then you really don't know what's happening with Rick or Chief Rick Gramza. 159, 155, and 120. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address the council? Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Becky Huebner-Lewin. I reside at 1313 East 26th Street. It's been over 4 months since Chief Rick Gramza was allowed to put himself on voluntary leave. The results of the Wisconsin Justice Department Division of Criminal Investigations investigation from July have just been now made public. In my entire career, which included dealing with elder abuse and neglect investigations, I have never seen an instance where it was the employee's decision to be put on leave when an investigation was taking place. The employer directs that the employee be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. This leave is usually paid, innocent until proven guilty. I am baffled by the fact that Gramza put himself on a voluntary leave with pay. So it was his choice to be on leave and pay himself. What is also absolutely baffling to me is the fact that in 1 week's time, Gramza was cleared of any wrongdoing. However, no report was received. According to the DCI report now finally received, Police and Fire Commission President Randy Gershman was made aware of an alleged affair on duty on city time and in city vehicles. And yet neither Gershman, the HR director, or administrator issued a directive for an internal investigation. City officials knew what the investigation was in regards to. Just because criminal charges were not filed at that time does not mean there was no wrongdoing. The investigation absolutely includes questionable behavior with sexual tones and minors. How could this not immediately warrant an internal investigation? Instead, he returned to work with high praise from the president of the Police and Fire Commission, and I quote President Randy Gershman, "I am grateful that Chief Gramza conducted himself with professionalism and as a law enforcement executive should when faced with exceptionally challenging circumstances. Chief Gramza worked hard for the betterment of law enforcement service for the city of Marshfield. Chief Gramza is a strong and dedicated leader. And I am confident that this matter will not distract him from his continued efforts, and this matter will certainly not affect the support we have for his continued efforts for the advancement of law enforcement services for our community. I'm glad that Chief Gramza will be back at work and leading this police department. I am also grateful for Assistant Chief Pat Zepps for the difficult responsibilities he undertook with professionalism and commitment during this challenging period." That quote was made on July 22nd. According to the investigation, one of the witnesses wasn't even interviewed until August 31st. Gramza was interviewed on the 21st, and the investigation was not completed until August 4th. Gramza went back to work before the investigation was even complete, and obviously before officials received the written report from the investigation. How could anyone make an employment decision without seeing the report? Anyone in a position of authority must use the following phrase to exercise that very authority: trust, but verify. To the Police and Fire Commission, not only were you aware of the initial allegations, but additional serious policy violations, yet failed to initiate an internal investigation. Furthermore, I have seen no evidence that the mandatory job function test implemented by Chief Gramza and Assistant Chief Zepps is a valid test to prove an officer can do their job. The Police and Fire Commissioners have failed to provide oversight. It is their very duty to protect against wrongdoing. It is why the commission exists. They have failed. Trust but verify. City Administrator Bargh, HR Director Reku, and the Police and Fire Commission should have initiated an internal investigation to prove without doubt that there was no ethical or city employee violation before Gramza returned to duty. Sexual harassment laws state it is unlawful to harass a person because of that person's sex. Harassment can include sexual harassment or or unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature, which those allegations most certainly did. It is the duty of all employers to fully investigate any sexual harassment claims. Victims must be protected. They have failed. I, like many frustrated taxpayers and citizens, have strong concerns of wrongdoing. Corrupt wrongdoing must be flushed out and stopped. We have been very proud to be a part of our great community and proud of our city officials. Until now, it is currently going to personally cost me approximately $800 to receive records that I requested in August and have yet to receive. Records of suspicious activity. I should not have to do this. Chief Grimes is now charged with 3 felony and 2 misdemeanor charges where he admitted wrongdoing. Why is he still receiving a salary, which is over $100,000 a year? Why do questions regarding the police department's job function test go unanswered? Not just unanswered, not even acknowledged. Again, a valued officer was terminated over what? Over 30 seconds? That proves absolutely nothing. And lastly, what has been done to protect the assumed plaintiffs? There seems to be a pattern to protect the chief, but he's the suspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address the council? Final call, anyone from the public? All right, seeing no one, we'll go to item D. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October 13, 2020 special meeting with Marshwood Utilities, November 24, 2020 regular meeting, and November 30th, 2020 budget meeting? Motion by Mr. Butke. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rosendich. Any discussion? A roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Paschal,
Yes.
Rosendich,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiros. Yes. Butke,
Yes.
Hemler.
I don't see him on. He'll probably try to log in a little bit. All right, thank you. That motion carries. Item E, staff updates. Aquatic Center project, Justin Casperson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give an update on the pool project. Overall, in general, the pool's been going very well. We've had favorable weather this fall, so we are on schedule and on budget. In detail, the rebar is being installed on a pool slab on the deep end. We're forming the walls, the zero depth entry area, and also forming the deep well wall slabs. Newman is there to perform concrete testing on all pours at the site. We still have some watering issues. We're still dewatering the south end, which is the deep end of the pool. We've had electrical coordination done on the trusses and the space up in that area. The trusses, the roofs, OSB, firewall construction should be complete this week. Drain tile along the parking lots have been installed. Marshfield Utilities installed a pad and electrical box this week or last week. Ideally, we'd like to get the entire building buttoned up with roof penetration sealed and water tightness by the end of this week. Asphalt shingles and felt should be going on next week. The masons will be completing the non-weight bearing wall portion of the project later next week. Plumbing and electrical rough-ins have been finished, and then aluminum window and door openings have been measured for installation. I would like to offer a tour to make it easy on everyone. I picked a date and a time that works the best before the snow. So we will be doing a tour on this Thursday, from 10 to 11, December 10th. All visitors must wear a mask. We'll provide hard hats and safety vests. If you're available, come on down to the pool. You can enter off of Central or the old off of Rodis. But we'll be doing a tour from 10 to 11 this Thursday so we can all be together and I can show you around the facility. Once again, I'll provide hard hats, safety vests. I just ask you that you wear a mask. Masks are required on a construction site.
Thank you. All right, move on to item F, mayor's comments. I know in the past I've talked about this group of people that gets together, and there's about 24 of them. I just thought this would be a good time to say thank you to them, and I'll also acknowledge who this group is. So I'm just going to briefly go through this. Jay Schrader and Ryan Neville from the Marshfield Clinic Health Systems, Sue Kunferman and Christy Rutter-Egg from Wood County Health Department, Dr. Ryan Christensen and Mike Drevlo from the School District of Marshfield, Lori Weiland from Columbus Schools, Michelle Bornke from UWSP Marshfield, Alex Lenbed from Midstate Tech, Ashley Winch and Crystal Bowman from the United Way, Andy Cavernan from Cornerstone Community Church, Scott Larson from Mackey, Gayla Gomez from Main Street Marshfield, John Nystrom from the YMCA, Sean Becker, Wood County Sheriff, Pat Zepps from the Police Department, from our Fire Department, Scott Owen, Pete Fletty, and Steve Bakos, Communication Director Tom Laux, Council President Tom Witzel, as well as Steve Bargh. This group meets, we meet once a week now to go over everything. And what's great about the information is it centralizes and goes out. So they really have been invaluable. And I'm sure that you read yesterday, but just as a, just to put it out, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services determined that the Marshfield Clinic Health Systems will serve as an initial distribution site to serve north central Wisconsin for COVID-19 distribution of vaccines. And they're anticipated in mid-December. So congratulations to this great health facility that we have right here. That's all my comments. Item G, any council comments? Comments from the council? Mr. Witsit, Mr. Fire.
Yes, I'd like to go forward and thank Jan Altman and her crew for putting on the community Thanksgiving dinner at the American Legion. They were great to work with, and I'll tell you this: they presented 775 meals. That was drive-through only, and we didn't hear any complaints. And as far as I know, the meal was good, and they did a great job.
Thank you. Anyone else from the council? How about reports from commissions, boards, or committees? Seeing none, we'll go to item I. Is there a motion to receive and place on file approving all recommended actions in the consent agenda? Motion by Mr. Fire, a second by Mr. Wagner. Any discussion? Mr. Peschel?
I'd like to pull item F2 for discussion.
Pull item F2, okay. A re-implement temporary use of sick leave. All right, other than that, if there's no further discussion then, please roll call vote.
Fire,
Yes.
Peschel,
Yes.
Rosendich,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiros. Yes. Budke,
Yes.
Hemler.
Pete, did you?
Hemler?
I don't think he can hear.
Yeah, it looks like he's, all right, so that motion carries 9-0. And then Nick, do you want to go on item F2, the re-implement temporary use of sick leave?
Yes, in the period of time since we discussed that at finance, budget, and personnel and passed it there, I've learned that there's one employee from the city who's affected by the gap between when that first expired and the new implementation of it. And that employee missed some time from work and was required to use vacation time or something like that rather than sick time. to account for their time off. I would like to propose or make a motion that we make this retroactive to November 1st. And that way that employee will be covered by the policy as well.
So the motion is to request a temporary permanent use of sick leave to COVID-19 exposure to November 1st. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Wagner. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please. It's where, oh. Mr. Butke, is that you?
It is.
Okay, your screen, okay. Please go ahead.
I'm just wondering if that shouldn't go back to the finance committee and they could do the same thing. And it could be retroactive back. I just don't like to go over what belongs in a committee.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner?
Thank you, Your Honor. I understand Mr. Butke's request, and under normal circumstances, I would do this. But given that the situation we're in now and the fact that I don't think anybody anticipated that there would be somebody in the gap, so to speak. I think this is a relatively simple thing. Rather than take up the committee's time with it, I'd much rather have it handled on council floor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Paschal,
Yes.
Rosendich,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiros,
Yes.
Butke,
Yes.
Hemler.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries 10-0. Item K, first reading of ordinance number 1446 to repeal, replace chapter 15 of the Marshfield Municipal Code, Building Code, presented by Josh Miller, Development Services Director.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. I'm just gonna pull up just the code here. I think you can all see that. So I touched on this last time a little bit, gave a high level overview of really what we're proposing to do. Chapter 15 has been in place since 1982, other than a few minor changes. Really, the purpose of this overhaul is to make sure that the code is compliant with all current codes and applicable standards, both locally and with the state. So we've and also would be implementable for both residential and commercial. So right now our chapter 15 is lacking a lot of things, and we're trying to make it up to date and current and allow for it to link to the SPS codes, the safety and professional services codes, and with state statute. So it's going to be easier for us to implement from a staff level, but also for residents and contractors to look up things. It's just a much easier code to follow. So I won't go through every single chapter by any means or section, but I just kind of wanted to highlight a couple of things and then certainly be able to take some questions. So a couple of things I did want to point out since we introduced this 2 weeks ago is that we did revise the numbering system. So this will be a lot easier for if we have to issue citations or just organization of the code. We've renumbered these sections so it's easier to list. And then there are a couple of things in the International Property Maintenance Code section that we've either omitted or changed a little bit. So with that, really, the code is laid out pretty consistently with other codes. You have an applicability section, and that really talks about, additionally, it talks about what other codes are adopted and what other standards are adopted. So that's where we talk about the SPS chapters, 320 through 325 for residential, and then 361 through 366 for commercial. So this applies to both residential and commercial. We have definition sections for both residential and commercial, and just kind of highlighting that you can see that there's a link to those. Those go directly to the state website. And then those are universal standard definitions. We don't have our Marshfieldism definitions anymore. So that'll be nice and clean. Talk about our department, Development Services Department, as the enforcement agent for this code. And then the standards for qualified building inspectors are listed here, so you people can look those up and see what those are. Also shows like what the requirements are for the inspector, what his abilities and authorities are to enforce this code. We have a section on permits talking about that. Obviously, to do any work, you need to have permits when they're required, what work is not required, building permits. And then change in use, that is a very important section. A lot of times people get a building, they want to remodel it or renovate it, and they don't think about how it's going to be used, or they don't think to come and get a building permit for it. So really, if you're going to change the occupancy of a building, you got to come talk to us to make sure that your new use is compliant with code. So if you have a different occupancy, sometimes different standards apply. So we want to make sure we catch those. A lot of those are situations like in a downtown area where you have an older building, and how do we make those the new uses comply with the current code as applicable. Continue to scroll through here, construction documents, so people can see what we require, what kind of plans are required when they apply for a permit. And this will all be tied to our Evolve software, so people can come and they'll get a checklist when they want to apply for a deck, when they want to apply for a fence, a new home. They'll see all the things that they have to submit with their application. So it's going to be very straightforward and clear. The fees are tied to our city fee schedule, which we adopted last month. And then this section 1508 talks about the inspections, so you can see what inspections you're anticipating. We do hand this information out as well, or go over this, but people can see this in code. It's pretty self-explanatory. To be able to occupy a building when the project is done, you need a certificate of occupancy. We deal with temporary structures. We also have a board of appeals, so if someone has an objection to how something was applied or interpreted, they can appeal it to the zoning board, and this section now references the zoning board. What to do with violations and stop work orders. And then we also have, beyond that, the Uniform Dwelling Code and the International Building Code, we have things for additions, alterations, and remodel for pre-1980 construction. So we have some certain exemptions for those types of homes that predate that, just because it's difficult for them to get up to the full standards of the Uniform Dwelling Code. A section for manufactured homes, and then dealing with residential, non-residential garage and accessory buildings, as well as deck. So those are the main provisions of the building code. It's basically two articles, two main sections in our building code. And then Article 3 is the International Property Maintenance Code. And this was previously covered by, I think, Chapter 1550 or Section 1553. Now this is a little bit more in depth, so we have more teeth to be able to enforce some of these things. I know we've touched on it before. Some of the aldermen, we get some complaints. And sometimes there's things we just can't do a whole lot about. Some of those things they're cosmetic, or they're things beyond our current code. Well, this new code, this property maintenance code, will have some of those things in there that give us the teeth to do some enforcement on that. So I think that'll be more well received by some of the aldermen that have concerns, and some of the residents that we hear from too. They don't like the answers that said, when we say, oh, there's really nothing we can do because there's nothing in our code, when you can clearly see there's something wrong sometimes. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to show that link is in the code to the International Property Maintenance Code. And then all you do is you click on that link, and there's all these different sections pertaining to the definitions for these, the general requirements. Here. So we talk about exterior property areas. So that's where things are disheveled, or, if there's garbage or things like that in the yard. We also have exterior, exterior structure standards. So we're dealing with siding and maintenance and painting and paint chipping and things like that. So that's really we also kind of just making sure that the buildings and things like in the buildings are in good working order. That's essentially what the property maintenance code is about. So we provided the links in there. Hopefully you've had a chance to dig into it a little bit and see kind of how it works. And I touched on this last time, but this is the International Property Maintenance Code. We do have a few hard copies in our office. But there's a link on the website. So that's a free version that we have. And how we're proposing to adopt this is really listing the changes that we are making to this code. So this isn't Marshfield's code. This is a general code that everybody could adopt. But in our ordinance, we're listing what things we're not including and what things we are including, and some verbiage changes that we need to include, and some dates. So some dates for apply for, winter are different in Wisconsin than they are in Texas, just as far as the weather goes and the climate. So there's certain things that we have to change, and we don't go by the residential, I forget what the actual term is, but there's an international residential code. We follow the uniform dwelling code. So that's where we have to change some language in those references. So with that, I do have Pat Kilty here. I do want to thank him for all his effort putting this chapter together, because there was a lot of research, and we've been talking about a property maintenance code, and we've been talking about doing this for a number of years, but we're finally bringing this forward. So I'm very excited to get this going. This is the first reading. We'll be back next week, and then be looking to have this apply January 1, 2021.
Thank you, Josh. Mr. Butke.
Yeah, I'm in favor of this update, but here's the problem. They could have been getting at some of these houses before. And we were told by our city administrator, well, when our inspectors go out, they probably got tunnel vision. They're just thinking of, come on. I know Mr. Bargh and I are going to be going out hopefully this week, and there's lots of them. If you don't see them, there's something wrong. And I'm going to be holding people to this. I'm going to want reports. I mean, there's bad houses. There's some really junk houses out there. And why they haven't been done, I'll have no idea. Somebody's not doing their job is what it is. The building permits, I know there's a lot of people that aren't getting building permits. We do next to nothing about that. If you looked at the municipality, they had a big article on that. Read it. That will tell you how you can do it and should be doing it. It's just crazy. Aldermen are not the watchdog for this stuff. We have inspectors and we have ordinance. Do your job.
Any further discussion from Mr. Witzel?
Thank you. I see in, well, before I get to Article 3, the idea is to get this aligned with what we're required to have in place by the state. And then are there things from the national ordinances that would be superseding the state?
I don't think I think it's no.
Okay, I do see reference in Article 3 about international property code maintenance. And as soon as I start saying international, it throws a little bit of a red flag up. According to the first paragraph on the next page, it says that Marshfield has adopted the 2015 International Property Code. And it goes on below that to say that certain items are going to be actually removed or renamed. So instead of like in Section A, all sections that refer to International Resident Code shall be revised to say Wisconsin Uniform Dwelling Code. Are we abandoning this international code, or does the state align with the international code? Is there a reason why we have to follow international code rather than state code? Could you explain that a little bit to me, please?
Yeah, so the International Property Maintenance Code is actually, it's actually effective in 40 different states. So there's 40 different states that have either the state has adopted, or there are municipalities within that state that utilize this code, which is essentially this document. So there's a different versions of this. We're going by the 2015 one. I think there's a 2018 one, and they're going to every 3 years. So sometimes it's pretty minimal changes, but the one that we were the most familiar with and the one we felt would be most applicable is the 2015 one. So we are adopting this code. What we are doing with the adoption of the ordinance is making some minor changes that make it more suitable to whether it's Marshfield or the climate or certain things that allow us to utilize this code. So not everything in here is exactly perfect how we wanted it. So when we have these changes, so you see that last section in the ordinance that talks about, refer to International Residential Code, we're switching it to Wisconsin Uniform Dwelling Code. So we made all those, any international plumbing code references now SPS 382. So we're making things that are pertinent to Wisconsin and to Marshfield because this is an international code.
What makes that international code? You said 40 states have some level of adoption. What makes that international?
Well, the International Code Council puts this together. So they're the ones that I think they oversee like the International Building Code. They put these documents together for communities to adopt. And it's a universal standard that allows people to have just a uniformity. And so everybody's consistent. So what we run into problems with in our current code is we have what we call Marshfieldisms that over the years, we said, okay, we're going to change this. We're going to do this way. And other nearby communities don't have to apply to that standard or they don't follow it. And so when you hear people like, oh, Marshfield is so restrictive, they do this way, other people aren't doing it that way. In some cases, it's because we've veered so far over, 38 years with changes to our code that no longer really matches a uniform standard. Other cases, other communities aren't implementing their code correctly or they're not following state law. So, but this is the best we can do to try to get on the same standard that most people should be following. Now, other communities, you don't have to adopt this one. You can do your own international or you can do your own property maintenance code. We just felt, why reinvent the wheel? They've done a pretty good job, thorough job. And other, like Wisconsin Rapids has this. So there's other communities that have done this the same way we're proposing to do it.
Okay, when you say international, again, you said an international panel put this together. Can you explain international, meaning, in my mind, more than just America? I guess that's kind of where I'm getting.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, I'm not, International Code Council is who puts together the International Building Code, so that's what we follow. So whether that's, I don't know how effective it is beyond America, I'm not really sure, but it's something that uniformly is followed by everybody in the United States. The Uniform Dwelling Code, Wisconsin's the only state that follows the Uniform Dwelling Code, which is a residential code. Everybody else follows a different residential standard. But I don't know, the international question you're getting at, I don't really know the answer to that.
Okay, and your one final question. You said that this new policy will add more teeth, but then you also commented that Marshfield's more restrictive than neighboring communities. So I'm a little bit confused. It makes it sound like more teeth means we have a better way to enforce things, but on the flip side of that, following this code alleviates some of our strictness. Could you explain that?
No, I guess when I was saying that, that's how it can be perceived. So in some cases, when people, you hear that from other people say, oh, sometimes a business will say it or residential, I didn't have to get this permit here or there. We had certain things in our code that were probably either interpreted poorly or interpreted differently and made it probably harder on people to either understand what was in the code or to apply it. So it made it challenging and maybe felt more restrictive to a resident say getting a building permit. But now if we have a standard, we can apply it uniformly. But we do have more teeth for an enforcement of those maintenance. So I mean that's really where the change is. So if there's dilapidated siding or paint chipping, before there really wasn't a whole lot we could do about it. I know there was complaints about it, but we really didn't have a strong standard to say, hey, you know what, you got to keep it in good working order. We had standards for fences and we had standards for decks, but we really didn't have it for everything. So now it's going to be, when we talk about giving us teeth, we can enforce that, and be lawful doing it, not just, oh, we didn't like this, so we're going to, make these people follow this rule.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from the council? All right, seeing nothing further, thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Item L, presentation Marshfield Utilities building update presented by Nick Cum, General Manager of Marshfield Utilities.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, I wanted to provide a overall update on our project and also cover some of the items that came up from the joint meeting with you. Since some of you are remote this evening, I just wanted to recognize we have a number of our commissioners here in the audience. Mike Ebro, the commission president, Paul Kapla, Harry Borgman, and John Schneider. Bear with me for a second. Ing told me how to do this. I'll see if I can get the presentation. I apologize, I wasn't able to send this to the council before the meeting, but I will send it either later tonight or tomorrow morning, so you have a copy of it. One of the areas that we talked about during the joint meeting is COVID-19, and obviously that's a hot topic that we're all talking about. We anticipate the new facility will be open to customers once the pandemic is behind us, so it'll change the current situation that we're set up. Another area that was brought up a little bit was the size of the lobby. The design of the lobby has more space to allow our customers to be more socially distanced. Overall, if you wanted to make a comparison between the vestibule and lobby that's out here at City Hall, the design for the new facility is about 20% smaller. And additionally, a considerable amount of the lobby space is corridors to be able to access the elevator. There's a restroom for customers. There's obviously fountains or water drinking stations. And then there's also a conference room to meet with customers privately. The facility also has provisions for air filtration, and I'm not going to go through each one of these, but those are just some of the items there. Obviously, trying to minimize the number of services that employees and customers have to touch so that we can reduce the spread of any of those types of viruses. Obviously, adequate space overall for vehicles and staff. And then finally, all these measures should positively position MU for potential future pandemics. Obviously, we hope that doesn't happen, but if indeed it does, it'll put us in a better position. And obviously, the seasonal cold and flu that we deal with on a year-to-year basis. Pse Rates. I wanted to hit on this briefly. I think many of you know that in the state of Wisconsin, we have 117 different electric utilities that serve the customer, 100% of the customers across the state. So as you can see, we have 81 electric municipalities, just like Marshfield. And within those 81, Marshfield is one of the larger ones. We're in the top 5 as far as there's different numbers you could use based on the size, customer count, how much sales are, things of that sort. But in general, we're in the top 5 as far as the largest. There's 24 electric cooperatives and 12 investor-owned utilities. I'm going to get into the rates a little bit more on the next couple slides, but even with the potential rate increase that we're talking about, our residential rates are still going to stay within the lowest 10% of the state. You know, our focus with projects of this size has been usually on the rate increase. The information on this slide and the next slide will show how the rates compare to other utilities in the central Wisconsin. So this is kind of just setting up the next slide. Essentially, we took a residential bill. The average residential bill uses 600 kilowatt hours. And what I'm going to demonstrate is the cost in the different utilities for the month of November, so this past month. The rates that I'll show are for the Marshwood utilities is the rate that includes the building cost in it already. And then the last line there talks about that PCAC charge on everyone's bill. Some months it's credits, some months it's charges. I basically made that 0 for all the utilities just to make sure we had an apples to apples comparison. So here you can see all those lines, and I apologize for the lines, but that's the PSC website that kind of just shows the boundaries of each of the utilities. And what I did is I put Marshfield in the middle, and you can see that dark outline. The black one that denotes our service territory. Just to note, you know, City of Marshfield is about 16 square miles. The electric utility actually serves about 120, 125 square miles. So we go into the rural, so predominantly Wood County, but we do touch Clark and Marathon as well. If you start at the bottom left, and I apologize, the Oakdale cooperative is hidden by the share screen thing there. But if that wasn't there, the number is $96.65. If you go up, you can see Clark Cooperative is the purple, and $97.20. So their average monthly bill is about that. And that makes sense if you think about it. Cooperatives are in the rural, so they do not have the customer count to spread the cost across. So that makes the cost per unit higher than what it does in more urban settings. Then you can see the 3 large investor-owned utilities. I think one of them was mentioned previously, Wisconsin Public Service. You can see Alliant Energy and Excel. Excel is kind of those blue clouds, if you will. They serve mostly into the west, the north. WPS serves mostly to the north and to the east of us. And Alliant serves to the southwest Wisconsin. You can see their average monthly bill for November would have been around $85 each. Down in the bottom is Wisconsin Rapids, another municipal utility about the same size as us. You can see that their monthly bill is just over $70 per month. And then in the middle, you see our cost, the $63.10. So if you want to compare us to WPS, you can see that on a monthly basis, we're saving our customers $22. Over the course of a year, that adds up. Over the course of multiple years, that really adds up. Yeah, go ahead.
Nick, I know the answer to this, but some of the comments that we had prior to the meeting. The fact that we own the utility makes a big difference as far as the rates. It was mentioned about selling to somebody else. Could you address that, please? I know the answer, but I think we need to hear that.
Well, I think there's a number of factors that could that would negatively impact us. I mean, first of all, you can see the rates right there on the sheet. I mean, each customer, an extra $20 out of their pocket just because we've served by a different company. Obviously, WPS is an investor-owned, they're a large utility. The likelihood of them having the staff they have here locally is unlikely, so their response times to outages would likely not be as fast as what ours is. Our staff obviously turn the dollars here locally. They live in the community, so they're going to go and support the local supply restaurants and businesses and such. So there's all those values. The pilot that we provide back to this body, the electric pilot is $1.3 million. If we were owned by WPS right now, that number would be about, Stevens Points was about $50,000. So you go from 1.25 million to 50,000, just like that, because you sell it. So there might be a short-term gain, but long-term, you're going to have that. In addition, WPS goes in for rate increases every other year. They're constantly changing the rate. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to kind of jump a little bit to the current status. Bid documents have went out on the street for the project. They're in the hands of all the potential contractors. We reached out to Myron, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on, reached out to all of the ones that are in their database. And you can see there's over 500. We also have a extensive list of local contractors that we tried to reach out as well to try to get them to bid. Obviously, we all know this is ran through state statutes. We follow the proper bidding laws. So it's not as though we can select local contractors. We have to select the lowest qualified bid, but we at least got the word out on the street that they're aware of the project, pricing a bid like. Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services, this kind of talks to what Josh was talking about earlier. This is plan review. So this is later this week, we'll have the plan review for the drawings. We're doing pre-qualification. It's something similar that the Board of Public Works does on an annual basis. We're doing that for this project. We're expecting the construction authorization from the state later this month. Bids are due just before Christmas. And then we're expecting, if everything comes together as we hope, bid and financial approval will go back to the commission for consideration on the 11th of January. And then the next evening, I would come back to this body for authorization for financial consideration of the project on the 12th. Talked a little bit about Myron. So MU is using Myron Construction as our construction manager. The city has used the construction manager on a number of projects. The current pool project has one, the library and so forth. The construction manager helps with the bidding process, but they also help with cost control, schedule, and handling the coordination of all the construction activities. The following are some of the cost control measures that we've completed through the summer months here and into the fall. And this list is just some of the major items that we've tried to take in consideration to control costs. You can see the first couple there talk about the transmission pole and some of the temporary items. If you remember, we had the phasing of our building set up with 2 phases. Well, there was some conflicts, so we were able to adjust those slightly. And you can see that that's an overall $300,000 savings. We're trying to reuse the existing emergency power generator that we have at the facility. I listed as bid alternative there. Is just that in the bidding documents, we're using that as the base price, but we're also looking at new as well. So we understand what the both costs are. And we'll try to make sure that we take the best solution. We revised the roof system from to basically provide the same structural strength, but look at some different materials. I can go on and on about these. One that was very shocking to me is, if you remember the video that we showed a number of months ago with a tour of the new facility, as you walk through, the ceiling tiles, we were trying to do like a clouded thing where you would see some of the under the building structure for the under the roof and so forth. So not a complete suspended ceiling as we have here. And unfortunately, that was a $93,000 adder, so that got scrapped pretty quickly in the process. So overall, you can see there's about $1 million of total impact that we've tried to take into consideration. Ultimately, it all comes down to the bids and when they come in. But we're obviously trying to position ourselves to be the most frugal as possible. The joint meeting that we had a few months ago, I think it showed that there's a need for some more communication and how we arrived at solutions that were selected for the solution that was selected. So I want to get into that here for the next 2 slides. Overall, the process in general focused on the following objectives: looking for the best valued solution, address the issues, we've talked about that, the space, the ADA compliance, and so forth. Try to find a long-term solution. The current facility is around 50 years old, trying to find something, or design something and build something to be similar. Obviously have short-term space so that we're not crammed, so that we can expand and add on staff as we need to, or different equipment. And also have consideration for future growth. That's one of the challenges we currently have, that we didn't, it wasn't planned to allow for it to expand in the future, maybe up or out or wherever it might be. Over the next 50 years, things can change quite a bit. And obviously we want to make sure that if we do remain on the current site, that a cohesive solution was collected with the pool. In addition, for some of you that haven't been on the council for as long, there were a couple things that happened prior that I wanted to just highlight. One was the Facilities and Functionality Committee. This was made up mostly of city staff, and this was before my time in this role. But the goal of this committee was to review the different city functions, your police, your city hall, your fire, streets, and the utility, and see if there's any synergies there to have a facility that might make sense that combines some of those functionalities. The city staff, completed that along with utility staff, and while they looked at multiple arrangements, the recommendation, at least from the utility perspective, was that it stay a standalone facility as it has been, just from the fact that the way we deal with customers, why customers come see us, and the magnitude of the equipment made the most sense to stay singular. And then the last thing is the pool committee. I think, Justin highlighted the pool a little bit earlier in the evening. And I'll talk about the pool a little bit later on as well, but in 16-17 was really when there was a committee put together that kind of determined or made a recommendation on where the pool should be long-term. And I know they looked at, I think, over to 20 or 30 sites. A number of them obviously not where it is now and where it is, and ultimately where it is what was chosen. And I think that has a big impact on the utility and the process that we've made as well. So I want to just get into, at a high level, some of the options that were considered by the utility and the utility commission. The first one there is an east side warehouse. Basically, there was a facility that we looked at trying to purchase, expand it, remodel it, and add on to it. It was located on the east side of town. Unfortunately, as I've heard this body say many times, as soon as you hear the city come and knock on the door for a property, the dollar signs start coming. So unfortunately, that option was dropped because we weren't able to come to a reasonable price for the property. Existing site with a pool space. So as part of the pool committee, one of the things that was talked about and discussed is if the pool was to remove, how would the utility expand? What would it look like? So that was an option that was looked at. Obviously, with the pool staying where it was, that option didn't go any further. A split solution. So what we did is we looked at basically keeping operations where the existing facility is, remodel it, add some space to it. And then I actually looked at a downtown location for more of our customer service and some of our administration. The reason being behind that is, as you know, we have 3,300 customers every month that come to our facility, either in person to the drop box or actually into the facility. And the thought process was if we redirected them downtown, maybe that helps with some of the foot traffic. Unfortunately, it created a lot of challenges. Unfortunately, downtown facilities aren't really meant for our type of operation and how the layout would work optimally. Parking and traffic was a consideration and concern as well. Not sure if it may detract from the normal core type businesses that are located downtown, more of your restaurants, local shops. And you may remember before we talked about the objectives, and one of them was trying to get our staff in one location, and this obviously didn't meet that objective. And unfortunately, the downtown facility that we identified, at least initially, was sold process, so that out of the radar. Another option we looked at is, as you may know, we own about 20 acres or so on the north end of town by the McMillan substation and east of the water treatment facility. We looked at building a complete new facility there. As you know, I think some of you have talked about the sledding that goes on up there. That creates some challenges as far as sloping, and there's a transmission line and some underground water main lines in there that would create some challenges. We all know how busy McMillan Street is, and having our big trucks pulling out on McMillan Street probably isn't the best long solution. Obviously, relocating has an impact on both customers and employees. And, one thing that came up in the process is the existing facility is unsaleable due to its location being by the substation, all the other infrastructure that's there. And it's obviously obsolete, a building, since it's not a code. So if we were to sell it, someone would be responsible to take care of those measures. And I think the biggest drawback or positive of that site really is its ability to maybe be a future renewable energy site. It has the potential for solar panels at some point, being that it's located so close to the substation, and obviously it's not really buildable for any other purpose. And we looked at the existing site remodel, and this was a cohesive solution. This was working with the pool as they're doing their expansion and updating. We would remodel the existing space and add additional office and garage space. Obviously, it allows us to reuse some of the existing outdoor. We have a tin shed, as we call it, in the back, and we already have the bunkers made up for all the water main and the poles, some of the other material that we use. I think we've all gone through remodel projects. They obviously they have the ability to have a financial risk. Sometimes you start breaking into knocking down walls and stuff, you're not sure what you might find. It limits our ability for future growth and expansion opportunities just on how the site is structured and how things would have to be built. It's a challenge to meet today's code requirements in a structure that's 50 years old. In the bathroom example that I mentioned there, I think as you think about it, our restrooms weren't built to ADA compliant, so they would need to be larger than ADA compliant. So if they need to be larger, that means the walls on the perimeter of the restroom have to be moved. And obviously some of those would go into offices and storage spaces, and that would be fine. It might make some of those areas smaller, but it also goes into hallways. And now you start going into hallways, well, now that's going to affect the walls on the other side, and now you're starting a domino effect of just, you're taking everything and moving everything. So it becomes very, that's where the cost comes in. And this cost was slightly less than the option selected. And I think one thing to keep in mind is, we're talking about a remodeling, but then we're also talking about building twice that in square footage to be able to accommodate everything. So that's why you see that the cost is only slightly less than what was selected. And then finally, building new on the current site, working with the pool, building the new spaces, demoing the existing facility in a phased approach so it doesn't minimizes the impact to both our employees and our customers. Optimize the layout, and achieves all the objectives that I reviewed earlier, including the ability to expand decades from now if it's ever needed. Some of the approvals that occurred and some of the different aspects back in February of 19, the commission directed staff to focus on new when they started looking at the cost of new versus remodel. Back in April of 19, we had a joint meeting between this body and the commission and talked about the building project, where it was at, and some of the timeline that was in front of us. In the June of 19, we reviewed both the offsite and onsite, and the commission directed staff to focus with the onsite option as the benefits of the onsite solution was more economical. We were unable to identify a use for the existing facility for another city function or sale if it was vacated. And ultimately, it was less disruptive for our customers and employees long term. And then finally, in January of this year, the commission approved the current design. One more slide before I do that. I just want to point of reference to where I was sitting in the audience, that red and blue binders that you can see, that's about 1,000 pages. Those are the spec documents for the project that are out on the street right now. So your plumbing, your HVAC, electric, steel, concrete, all the different aspects in there. And then the drawing set, that's the small drawing set. That's of almost 200 pages worth of different drawings, again, account all those items. So those are the things that many hours have been put in by different engineering teams and my staff and I in reviewing and re-reviewing and trying to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So big thing, why now? Long overdue. This is something that as I've gotten into this role, I heard some of you just say, you guys have been talking about this for so long. Let's just either move forward or take it off the table. Uncertainty on the pool location really hampered our decision ability. And ultimately the decision to put the pool where it is gave us the clarity we needed to move forward with the project. And obviously, we worked together, Justin's team and mine, to make sure that we've made a solution that's going to best fit the city long-term at that site. We've talked about our finances in previous meetings. We're in a good spot to address the need at the same time. Borrowing rates are forecasted favorably, they're all-time lows. And, not approving funding does not solve the need. It just kicks the can down the road. We waste money in the form of the sunk costs. I just showed you the documents that have been put together. Like I said, there are numbers of hours that were put into putting those documents together. We run the risk of higher financing costs as the markets rebound. And obviously, every year that we delay, inflation drives construction costs higher.
All right, questions for Nick? Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. Could you just really quickly tell us what the estimated total cost of the project is?
The estimated total cost that body was $17.5 million.
That's million with an M?
Correct.
Okay.
That was that did not include the potential solar solution on the rooftop.
Okay, and it looks like from some of your documents that that's actually going to be down a little bit with some of the cost savings that you're looking to try to incorporate.
I'm working diligently, but until the bids come in, I can't really. It's hard to speculate.
Sure. If I may.
Please.
All right. You said that the rate estimate that you were showing us was estimated after a rate increase would occur due to this project. If you could touch on a couple of things here. First of all, and I know the answer, but I just want to make sure that the public is aware. When I get my electric bill, it's a whole lot more than $65. So if you could just touch on what else am I paying? And then also, if you could touch on when you would anticipate any kind of a rate increase would be implemented in conjunction with the construction project.
Sure. So every month we send out a bill to all of our customers. City residents, they see a bill that includes their electric, which may also include area lighting or street lighting, or area lighting, I should say, if they have like a light that is dedicated just to their home or business. They also are charged their water, which includes fire protection charge, which provides the ability for us to make sure our facilities are adequate to support fires for our fire department. And then lastly, the wastewater. All of those charges are on a typical bill. And as far as the rate increase goes, we have to go through the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. They mandate all of our rates. They look at all of our books on an annual basis, and anytime we go in for a rate case, we would start construction on the project in 21 into 22, complete it in 22. In 22, we would go to the rate state and ask them for a rate change. And they usually take 9 to 12 months for a rate change. So we would forecast sometime in late first or second quarter of 2023.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Further questions? Mr. Butke.
First of all, I got to commend Justin and Nick and the staff because with other directors in place, there was a lot of digging in the heels, and I'm glad you guys worked it out. And
you didn't see him in the sling the other day, did you?
Is that what it took? But one thing, we're talking about COVID and all this. One thing I would hope that you know, we always come up with all these different codes and stuff. I would like to see, and maybe you have it, the doors entering the place, motion doors. Because even before the pandemic, you know, just with the general flu, people touching doorknobs and so on, common colds, there's a lot of that. So that's one thing that would be nice if the people in charge, and I'm not talking locally, that would make that provision there because it saves a lot of.
Yeah, we actually optioned that feature. It's not the touchless, it's more those round buttons. So you'd have to hit your elbow or something.
Okay.
But it's, what I've been told is between 5,000 to 7,500 per door for that to be added. So
that's better than having the.
Yes, it is.
Any further questions for Nick? And I can't see, Ing, can you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because I don't see all the,
Sorry about that.
there we go. All right. Any further questions from the council? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you.
Item M, request for input related to the 2022-2026 CIP update presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right, great. Now that the budget is behind us, we're looking ahead now to the next CIP process, which will start right after the first of the year. And we wanted to give the council an update to provide any input on that process before staff digs in. Some of you will remember that in December of 2018, our CIP policy was updated to kind of revamp the schedule a little bit, among other things, and provides this opportunity for the council as an initial kickoff in the process versus the old process where the council didn't see the proposed projects until much later in the process. That 2018 policy change also revised the definition of capital project. It's a much more expansive definition now, includes other large purchases that have budget impacts, such as our vehicle and equipment, the technology, hardware and software, and recurring infrastructure maintenance, like our crack filling and seal coating and so forth. Historically, these large ticket items were not capital projects by definition, so they came in at budget time. And then it was left up to the city administrator to go through a prioritization and pare down those requests to balance the budget. Now they're all subject to the same prioritization through the CIP process for those projects over $10,000 in size. So when we get to the budget time, then we're mostly focusing on operational costs. And I think you saw that in this year's budget discussion. While there were a few CIP changes, most of our discussion during the budget time was on operational costs. I did intend to include a copy of the policy in the agenda packet, and I realized today that I did not, so I emailed that out separately this afternoon. If anybody didn't get it and had questions on the policy, feel free to let me know. But what I really wanted to do tonight is just spend a few minutes just talking about a few snapshots of where the CIP stands right now, both in 2020, 2021, and then looking forward. So in 2020, we had a fairly large year in our capital improvement program, $14 million worth of capital projects in the 2020 budget. The big one, of course, was the pool at $6 million. And then of all those projects, we had a few that did not get started in 2020. There was about $406,000 worth of projects that did not get done. But the rest were started and several of those are ongoing. I did include a complete list in the agenda packet of projects from 2020. Those that are highlighted in yellow did not get started in 2020 as planned for a variety of reasons. Now, looking ahead to what's been adopted in the 2021 budget, our adopted CIP had just about $7.7 million in capital projects. And that adopted CIP included the 17th Street project for 2021. Back in September, you'll recall that the council delayed that project 1 year to soften our borrowing requirements for 2021. So now the 2021 CIP spending is just under $6.8 million. As I mentioned, we had a few minor reductions during the budget process, but we're still just under $6.8 $8 million. Again, there's a full list of the 2021 projects in the agenda packet, and those highlighted in yellow on the 2021 list are those that did not make it in the adopted budget. So I do want to point out that of the $6.7 or so million in CIP funding for 2021, only about 2.8 million of that is in long-term debt. We really focused on keeping the debt down for 2021, and that's the lowest, one of the lowest proposed uses of debt in quite a few years at only 2.8 million for 2021. Then I wanted to just look ahead a bit to future reliance on long-term debt to fund our CIP. So when we get to balancing the next CIP update, we need some targets for those 5 years. And as you recall, our goal is to borrow less each year than we're paying off in principal. And Ron, our finance director, has recommended that our target for the non-TIF district or non-enterprise fund debt be set at 3.3 million, a little bit higher than where we ended up for 2021. And ideally, we'd hold that flat for 5 years. Now, you could certainly exceed that in any of the given year if there was a major project, but we understand now that that increase in debt could trigger a corresponding tax increase the following year. But if we were to hold that 3.3 million for each of the next 5 years, that'd be 16.5 million in borrowing over 5 years. Our last adopted CIP, the 2021 to 2025, had just over $17 million in debt in that 5-year period. So about 600,000 more than what our target would be. And if you look at the individual years, the year of 2022 is the highest year at 3.9 million. So for next year, we're looking at trying to trim about $600,000 in debt-related projects to hit that $3.3 million goal. Now in 2022, remember, we have the 17th Street project. And going into our CIP process, staff is assuming that that project is still a high priority for 17th Street. So we would work to try, that 17th Street project is still high priority. So we would work to keep that in and look for that $600,000 in cuts in other areas. And then another major component in our CIP funding is the tax levy. And over the last several years, the tax levy used to balance our fund capital projects has diminished greatly. In our recently adopted 2021 budget, we're only using $272,000 or 4% of the capital projects being funded with tax levy. And these are primarily the IT projects, which historically have been funded through tax levy even before they were added as capital projects. So if we look at that 272,000 over 5 years, keeping that flat, we would have about 1.3 million in tax levy funding over the 5 years. If we compare that to the adopted CIP from last year, that only had 1.2 million in tax levy funding. So it appears that that's a manageable goal, that we could likely make that 272,000 a year in tax levy workable in the next 5 years. So then the last thing I have included in your agenda packet is the list of projects for 2022 to 2025. We'll be adding a 5th year, which is 2026. And at this point, we're just looking for any input the council might have in the priorities, I guess reaffirming that, for instance, that 17th Street is still a priority. Then anything else that we want to make sure we keep in that CIP as we go ahead and start our prioritization. Happy to take questions tonight and input, or if you have questions as we move ahead, you can feel free to let me know. But with that, I'd open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions from the council to Dan? Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. The CIP is becoming more problematic every year. The recent change in our borrowing, or what we're going to be borrowing over the next few years, is going to make it even more difficult. And the one thing that has always amazed me is how we watch that levy amount go down from about 900,000 a year to what did you say, 275 right now? I think that's what it is. That's amazing. We used to be able to fund a lot of it without going into debt. And now we've got a problem. One thing that bothers me, and I'm going to harp a little bit about the policies and the definitions in the policies. And the reason some of the things you're doing, like, well, number one, putting technology upgrades in there. The total budget for technology for 2021 is something like $1,050,000. Now, a lot of that is, there's salaries in there, but there's software upgrades and there's hardware in there too, much of which is going to eat up a lot of our ability to do some of the long-term projects that we want to do with CIP. The other thing, and you talk about you change the number for consideration of what is considered a capital project, bringing that number down to $10,000. And I suspect we did that to accommodate some of the IT stuff. I think that needs to be changed. The other thing is, I don't even remember, and I think that this was new. There's a new designation called capital maintenance project, and that's a recurring infrastructure maintenance program that required funding at a consistent level to ensure adequate level of service year over year. We may not be able to meet those goals, Dan. I mean, it seems to take the discretion of the council away in saying, okay, we can't afford to do this thing for 5 years. Maybe we can do 1 or 2 years or something, but that's it. But what this seems to say is, as a matter of policy, once we place a project in under that designation, we're stuck with it for 5 years. That's what it seems to say. I don't know. I mean, I feel that some of these things need to be addressed and looked at. I think we need to revisit those definitions, and we need to take a little better care on them. I don't have anything to add about what projects I want to add in. I want to know, there was like $406,000 that didn't get done this year. Is that already kicked into next year? I mean, are we already obligated for that next year? And we got what, about just under $1 million for West 317? Are we going to do that in 2022? What are we going to, and what are we going to have to give up to get that in? I mean, these are questions we're going to have to look at in some detail. And this, what we're doing tonight, I guess I'm not totally prepared for in terms of being able to speak project by project. But anyway, you know where I stand. I wanted to talk about policy and see how we do. Okay.
Dan.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. I always appreciate your perspective, Alderman Wagner. It's been a while since you've been on the CIP committee, and so it's good to have your fresh perspective on some of the policy. But essentially what it's turned into is more than just a capital projects plan. It's almost a spending plan, because whether or not these projects were in the CIP or not, we still had to deal with them at budget time. And it was quite a struggle at budget time, whether it was an IT project or a street maintenance, track filling type project. There's still big dollar amounts. And this was a way to kind of vet some of these projects while we're at the CIP stage versus at the budget stage. Maybe it's a little different perspective on what you're used to, but it was really trying to get at the major projects that impact the budget. The 10,000 threshold was changed in the policy, but our older policy had it at 5,000, and that was, we felt that was too low. As far as projects that, once they're in, these maintenance projects are targeted spending, just like our asphalt paving program. We've targeted that at $2 million a year for a long time. Most years we don't make it. Same thing with our capital maintenance, the crack filling and steel coating and so forth. We're targeting that at $400,000 a year. In 2020, it was at $350,000. So I don't think we're locked into those 5 years, but it helps with the definition of what we had hoped to include in this plan. As far as the projects that didn't get done in 2020, several were funded with room tax, and there was a lot of uncertainty about the availability of room tax, so those were put on hold very early in the process. So those will go back in the hopper again for consideration in the next CIP. There was one at the airport that was repurposed for a higher priority, the crack filling that you remember out there. And then there were a few in the development services that just didn't get off the ground in 2020, which will come back around. I think in 2021 budget, I think will include some of those things. At this point, it's all good discussion. I'm sure we'll have further follow-up, and I'd be happy to take any other questions.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. You hit an important topic that I just wanted to touch on, and I know what you know what I'm going to say. 17th Street. I've had more residents from my district express concern of that not being done, of that being pushed off again. I did receive a single concern of having that project still on the books. I do have one resident would like to not see that happen ever, but the majority of the people I represent in that area definitely want to see that project moving forward. So that would be something you had questioned whether or not we wanted to still see that on the list. I personally would like to. I think it's about a decade overdue. And I think that at some point, we're going to be done with COVID. And at some point, we're going to see a lot more activity happening in that area, especially with the fairgrounds. I think that that's going to be an important project to have completed. The only other thing I wanted to comment, kind of countering or maybe adding to Mr. Wagner's comments, I do appreciate this format of what we're doing. I do appreciate seeing kind of a 5-year plan, spending plan, CIP plan, whatever you want to call it. I do like seeing this. I do think that it makes budget time a lot easier when we can kind of see what projects are we sort of earmarking for when. And I also am very aware that just because a project shows up to be completed 5 years from now, it probably won't be, because I know how budgets go and I know that things get pushed a little bit further and a little bit further. So I do like that we're having some sort of a plan of what we'd like to see happen when, of course, with the ability to flex that a little bit as we approach each year. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, thank you, Dan. Item N, request to approve a contract with Running Inc. for taxi service for calendar year 2021, presented by Steve Bargh, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. This program has been very important to the city over the years as a means of providing transportation for our community, especially to those who are seniors or have some disabilities. It helps to keep them able to be making appointments and doing just basic life things. And so it's been very good for our community. We've been operating under the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. We get federal and state grants that still pay for a majority of the service, although that percentage has been slowly declining over time. And it's a shared ride service, as I think most of you know. Well, back in 2018, in the fall of that year, we went out for proposals for the service, and we ended up choosing to stay with Running Incorporated from Bargh. They do business as Marshfield Public Transit. They do, I believe, a very good job. Initially, when they took the control of the service, there were some bumps in the road, as you might expect when somebody's getting up and running. No pun there intended. But they, I think, provide a good service. We periodically have some concerns raised to us about individual circumstances, and we help connect those individuals with people at Running, and they're usually worked out. Anyway, so when we signed on with them in 2018, a lot of people think of that as a 5-year contract, but it really was a 1-year contract with 4 one-year option years to follow. So kind of a 5-year commitment, but each year requires a separate contract. So in September of this year, the council did approve going forward with another option year with Running Incorporated for the year 2021, but they also directed staff to work on a contract that we could bring forward and have approved for that calendar year. So what you have right now is simply a 1-year agreement with Running for year 3 of that 5-year period to continue providing the taxi service to the city of Marshfield for calendar year 2021, and the staff would recommend approval of this contract.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the contract with Running Inc.? Motion by Mr. Fire, second by Mr. Butke. Any discussion? Mr. Butke?
Steve, this last year, we didn't get the money that we thought we were for the grant from the state. And did we have to find that money somewhere then, somewhere else out of the contingency, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I think you may recall, you're not on the Finance Budget and Personnel Committee, but it went through the council too, that Ron Allman, our finance director, brought forward a budget resolution to transfer monies to cover that local share. You know, over the years, we've often had a local share. We don't talk about it very much. It's the difference between the cost of the service separating out after the federal and state grants and the rider fares. And, you know, sometimes that may be $10, $15, $20,000, you know, which I know maybe sounds like a lot, but out of the total cost of the service, it's not that bad, and it provides an important amenity for our citizens. This past year, you're right, we've had a couple of years where we've not done quite as well. Now this year we're getting a benefit because the CARES funding is being provided through that program under the COVID-19 assistance is really helping us out and continues to help us out. We're not expecting to have any local share as it looks right now in 2021. I would still like to talk to the council during 2021 about possible fare increases in case that doesn't happen. We've been really stuck on the same numbers for quite a while in terms of both the regular fares and the fares for seniors and those with disabilities. And I know that latter category is fairly, intimidated by the thought of fare increases because many of them are on fixed incomes. But like I said, it's been quite a while, and I think we probably want to look at minor increases in both those categories. But like I said, Tom, for 2021, it looks very favorable that we may well not even have a local share at all.
Yeah, Steve, and I was aware of that on the council and finance, but where I was going with this is exactly what you talked about at the end there, is nobody likes to see increases, especially for the elderly, but I think we need to look at that. So we're prepared if we don't get the funds from the state.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Good point. And not only the fares charged to our citizens in those two categories, but also the agency fares that we charge. It sounds like we've got maybe some room to edge those up a little bit to make up any gap as well. So I think regardless of where this ends up, look forward to seeing me sometime during 2021 to talk about whether or not we should do a fare increase. Like I said, it's been a while, and if we keep it to as payment increase as we can, I think people will understand.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Paschal,
Yes.
Rosenbich,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Piros,
Yes.
Budke,
Yes.
Hemler,
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Spears, did you get that? I think.
It went out for a minute, yes.
Okay, so you're okay. All right, thank you. That motion carries 10-0. Item O, any suggested items for future agendas? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Budke, a second by Mr. Bargander. Thank you all very much. We're adjourned.